What if I told you that at the very moment the hammer struck flesh, the physical world was the least important thing happening? What if, in the unseen realm just above the blood-soaked earth and beyond the agonized cries of men, two of the most formidable archangels in all of creation were watching, not as spectators, but as sentinels? On one side, Michael, the warrior of heaven, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword forged in celestial fire. On the other, Uriel, the flame of God, his presence a silent inferno of pure revelation. And between them, hanging on a cross, was their king. You have heard the story of the crucifixion 100 times, but I promise you, you have never seen it like this. Because hidden in the shadows of Calvary, in dimensions most of humanity never even dreams of, something was unfolding that defies logic, challenges doctrine, and rips the veil off everything we thought we knew about that fateful day. So, ask yourself, why did the sun vanish from the sky at high noon? What was Jesus really doing in the spirit while his body was being tortured? And what was the true assignment given to Michael and Uriel as the King of Glory was pierced by the spear of a Roman soldier? Stay with me, because once you understand what these two archangels did at the cross, you will never see Jesus or spiritual warfare the same way again. And if you are new here, welcome to the place where we uncover the hidden, the divine, and the things no one dares to talk about. From angelic warfare to prophetic secrets, if it is in the Bible and it is mysterious, you will find it right here. So buckle up, like, and subscribe. Let us go deeper. Most people only see the cross from the ground up. They imagine the dusty hill, the cold indifference of the Roman soldiers, the jeering, grief-stricken crowd, and a bleeding man nailed between two common criminals. And yes, that is precisely what happened. But that is only the surface layer, the story that flesh and blood could perceive. What if you could see in the spirit? What if you could pierce the veil that separates the natural from the supernatural? Because right above that hill called Golgotha, a war was taking place, a war older than time itself, and the final battle was just beginning. Let me take you there. In the unseen world that exists parallel to our own, the air was not just thick with sorrow, it was charged with divine tension. The angelic choirs were not singing. They were silent, watching, waiting with a reverence that bordered on terror. From his throne of shadows, Lucifer, the fallen one, the ancient dragon who once led the music of heaven, was observing his masterpiece. This was it. The moment he had schemed toward for millennia, ever since he first heard that hated prophecy in Eden, the seed of the woman will crush your head. And now, here was that seed, hanging, bleeding, helpless, or so it seemed. A triumphant roar echoed through the demonic ranks. The war was over. But Lucifer was not the only one watching. Hovering in realms of pure light, positioned like two pillars at the spiritual boundary between heaven and earth, were Michael and Uriel. They were not merely observing, they were on duty, guardians of the single most important moment the universe had ever known. Michael's appearance was nothing short of terrifying. A being of impossible stature, clad not in shining gold, but in armor that seemed forged from solidified starlight, pulsing with an ancient, living fire. His sword was drawn, and etched into its glowing blade were the secret names of God. His wings were not made of soft feathers, but of a substance that shimmered like captive galaxies. Uriel, by contrast, was a walking furnace. His form blazed with the unbearable brilliance of the sun, his eyes white-hot with the light of revelation. He is the angel of wisdom, of prophecy, of divine mysteries, whispered before the foundation of the world. For centuries, they had been the silent guardians of God's redemptive timeline. And now, they were watching their Creator die. Then, at noon, it happened. The sky turned black. Not cloudy, not overcast, a deep, impenetrable black that swallowed the light for 3 terrifying hours. This was no solar eclipse. This was a spiritual event. The sun had not refused to shine. Its light was being violently suppressed. The darkness was not physical. It was an invading force. Lucifer's celebration faltered. This was not part of his plan. The darkness felt holy. It was then that the earth shook, but the spirit realm screamed. As Jesus groaned under the crushing weight of all human sin, a shockwave tore through the invisible world. Angels in the lower dimensions trembled. Demonic forces, who moments before were celebrating, suddenly recoiled from the hill, a primal fear seizing them. This was not going right. It was too quiet. There was no resistance. It was as if Jesus was allowing it to happen. And that is what terrified hell. Because demons understand a principle many believers forget. Power restrained is infinitely more frightening than power unleashed. Jesus had power. Not just moral authority or the strength of a prophet. He had raw, cosmic universe, creating power with a single whispered word. He could have summoned not just 12 legions of angels, but the full might of the heavenly host. With a single thought, he could have called down a fire that would have turned Golgotha into a crater of glass. He could have stepped off that cross, the nails dissolving into dust, and the entire Roman Empire would have ceased to exist. But he did not. And in the spiritual realm, that silence, that profound and terrifying restraint, was deafening. It was a roar louder than any battle cry. Hell was prepared for a war. It was not prepared for a willing sacrifice. The demons, who had been celebrating, now watched in a state of growing dread. This was not a defeat. It was a strategy they could not comprehend. High above, Michael looked at Uriel. He said nothing, but his grip on his celestial sword tightened until the very air around it seemed to warp. His entire being was coiled like a spring, a lion chained but straining at the leash, waiting, begging for the command to be set loose. Every instinct he possessed as heaven's general screamed for him to intervene, to descend like a thunderbolt and end the mockery. Yet, he held his position. This was a new kind of warfare for him, a battle won not by the sword, but by stillness. Uriel, glowing with an almost painful white fire, did not flinch. His eyes, burning with the knowledge of ages, were locked on Jesus' face, reading the story that was being written in blood and pain. He saw not a victim, but a high priest offering the ultimate sacrifice. They both knew something the rest of creation did not. They knew what was coming. Because before time began, before the first star was hung in the void, there was a scroll, a divine scroll, held in the right hand of the Father, sealed with 7 seals. Written within was the entire redemption plan of God Himself. Every prophecy, every battle, every appointed moment that would lead to this very hour. And as Jesus hung there, that scroll was being unrolled in the throne room of heaven. He was not dying because he had lost. He was dying because he was winning. And the only way to win this kind of war was to descend lower than death, deeper than shame, and into a darkness darker than sin itself, and then, from the inside, tear it all apart. Uriel knew the words on the scroll. Michael could feel the power of its unfolding in his very bones. But even knowing the plan, even understanding the glorious outcome, they both felt something no angel had ever been created to feel before: helplessness. Their power was absolute, but their orders were clear. They could not move unless heaven commanded it. They could not interfere unless the Son gave the word. And then, it happened. The silence that had terrified hell was finally broken. A voice, raw with human agony yet resonating with divine authority, cried out, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." The cry did not just echo across the skull-shaped hill, it pierced through dimensions. It ripped through the angelic realm like thunder shattering an eternity of silence. To the human ear, it was the desperate cry of an abandoned man. My God, why have you forsaken me?" But in the spirit, it was something else entirely. It was not a cry of weakness. It was a summons, a pre-arranged signal, a frequency only heaven's high command could decipher. In that one moment of perceived defeat, the king who was bleeding on a tree gave an invisible command, one that activated the entire angelic army and changed the course of eternity forever. Michael knew it instantly. He turned to Uriel, not with fear, but with a look of awesome, terrifying reverence. The waiting was over. The next stage of the battle had just begun. No trumpet sounded. No thunder cracked from the blackened sky. No angel descended with wings of fire. But every throne in heaven, every demonic principality, every lesser spirit hiding in the shadows of the cross, felt it. A divine whisper that bypassed all physical senses. It did not vibrate through the air. It moved through the spirit, a direct transmission from Jesus' dying soul to the archangels stationed in the skies. And the message, though silent, was an ironclad command. Hold the line. Guard what is mine. Now, that might not sound earth-shattering at first, but when it came from the mouth of the eternal Son, bleeding and crowned with thorns, that command activated the full authority of heaven. Jesus was hanging on the precipice of two realms. His body was in the natural, subject to pain and death. His soul was preparing to descend. But his authority as king remained fully, terrifyingly intact. Michael, the war angel of God, snapped into formation. From the very beginning, Michael was heaven's general. He commanded armies that numbered in the millions. He was the one who would cast the great dragon from the heavens, the one who wrestled with demonic princes over the fate of kingdoms. And at the cross, he was not just a spectator. He was on active duty. He stood in a realm just above the Roman sky, his sword drawn. But this time, it was not for bloodshed. He was not guarding a nation or a holy place. He was guarding a person. And more than that, he was guarding a transaction. Because when Jesus took upon himself the sins of the world, it was not merely a poetic burden. It was a legal exchange of cosmic proportions. Every soul trapped by the curse, every chain of addiction, every failure, every wicked thought from Adam until the end of time was being legally transferred and placed onto him. It was a transaction so immense, so audacious, that all of hell had gathered to witness it, hoping to find a flaw, a loophole, an accusation that could nullify the contract. And that is precisely why Michael was there. He was heaven's divine enforcer, ensuring no demon could interfere. No spirit of confusion could slip in. No accusation from the enemy could alter the covenant that was being signed in the blood of the Lamb. Michael was forbidden from interfering in the physical torment, but in the spiritual court of law, he was an untouchable wall of fire, standing between the dying Christ and the realm of demonic legalism. But what about Uriel? His assignment was different, yet no less critical. Uriel is not an angel of war. He does not roar in the clouds or strike the earth. Where Michael brings overwhelming force, Uriel brings blinding clarity. He is the keeper of revelation, the angel of divine light. And at the cross, his assignment was perhaps the most terrifying of all. For in that moment, Jesus was not just dying, he was becoming sin. Let that sink in for a moment. The very light of the world, the Word through whom all things were made, was about to voluntarily enter a darkness so profound that it would separate him from the Father. Uriel, burning with the pure fire of God's mysteries, stood as the guardian of that revelation. He was tasked with ensuring that the truth of what Jesus did on that cross would echo not just in the natural world, but through timelines, across nations, and into the hearts of humanity for all generations. He released a wave of divine light across time itself, a spiritual ripple that would one day knock Saul of Tarsus off his horse, inspire the hands of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and open the eyes of believers in nations that did not even exist yet. As Jesus' blood hit the dust, Uriel moved. Then, at the exact moment Jesus breathed his last, the great veil in the temple tore from top to bottom. But that was no mere fabric ripping. That veil was a symbol of the divine separation between a holy God and sinful man, a place no one could enter except the high priest, and only once a year. What most people do not realize is that this veil was reinforced by supernatural forces. Angelic sentinels had guarded that holy separation for generations. And now, Michael and Uriel stood down from that post, not in defeat, but in perfect obedience. The Lamb had just become the bridge. The veil no longer needed guarding. Uriel released a final, silent burst of holy fire. And in the realm of the Spirit, Michael sheathed his sword. The war was not over, but the battle for access to God had just been won. Jesus had breathed his last. The ground quaked, the rocks split, and the veil was torn in two. But while men on earth stood in stunned silence, watching a lifeless body hang in the midday darkness, something far more terrifying and glorious was happening beneath their very feet. The cross was not an end. It was a doorway. Because Jesus, the sinless, spotless Lamb of God, was descending into Sheol. Not symbolically, not as a poetic metaphor, but spiritually, literally, and powerfully. And he was not going alone. Following in his wake, like a royal honor guard, were Michael and Uriel. They were not there to protect him. No force in creation could dare challenge him now. They were there to bear witness to what no angel had ever seen before. The king was about to walk through hell's gates, uninvited and uncontested. First, let us be clear about what Sheol is. It is not the cartoonish realm of fire and pitchforks that Hollywood imagines. In the ancient Hebrew understanding, Sheol was the realm of the dead, a vast, shadowy waiting place divided into compartments. It held the wicked in a state of torment, and the righteous dead, those who died in faith, waiting for the promise in a place of peace, often called Abraham's bosom. A great, impassable gulf was fixed between them. It was a kingdom of silence and memory, a prison where death itself was the warden. But Jesus was not just another soul arriving at its gates. He was the Word in spirit form, still bearing the spiritual weight of our sin, but with his divine nature utterly undiminished. He entered Sheol not as a victim, but as an invader. The moment his spirit crossed the threshold, the entire underworld trembled. A shockwave of pure holiness ripped through the gloom. The fallen watchers, the ancient rebels from before the flood, locked in chains of shadow, felt a power that seared their very essence. The chained giants and forgotten spirits who dwelled in the deepest pits felt something shift, as if the very foundations of their prison were groaning. A light had entered their darkness, a life had entered their death, and it was a presence that did not belong. Lucifer felt it too, having left the hill of Golgotha satisfied, believing it was finally done. A cold dread now washed over him. His kingdom was being invaded without a sound, without an army, without even the strength of a mortal breath. Jesus was marching through hell with the unshakable authority of heaven. And behind him walked Michael, silent, his form glowing with a furious, contained power. He was the enforcer of the divine covenant, and his presence here was a legal declaration. This was not a trespass. It was a reclamation. And beside him walked Uriel, burning with the pure flame of revelation, his light piercing the ancient darkness. He was not just a lamp. He was the truth of God made manifest, illuminating the forgotten corners of the abyss and exposing every shadow for what it was. The Psalms had prophesied this exact moment. Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in Psalm 24:7. Now, read that again, but picture this scene. Jesus, the King of glory, walking through the shadow dimension of the dead, approaching the ancient gates of captivity, gates forged in rebellion, and older than any Roman Empire. And what does he do? He does not knock. He does not plead. He speaks, not with a shout, but with the quiet, absolute authority of eternity itself. And the gates, held shut for millennia by the power of sin and death, begin to groan, not because metal is moving, but because the legal chains that held them are shattering into dust. Here is where it all comes to a head. Michael, the warrior angel, was not there to fight. He was there to enforce. For in that moment, Jesus was not making a request. He was not bargaining or pleading for keys. He was executing a divine search warrant on the domain of death itself. He was taking them, the keys to death, the keys to the grave, the keys that held every soul in bondage since the fall of man. And as Jesus stepped through the now powerless gates, Michael stood as heaven's witness, his sword held high not as a weapon, but as a gavel, declaring in the spirit realm, this transfer of authority is lawful, absolute, and eternal. Every demon, every principality, every dark power was forced to acknowledge the verdict. Their dominion was over. While Michael enforced the divine authority of Christ, Uriel did something unimaginable. He carried with him a portion of the sealed mysteries of God, truths locked away since the beginning of time. And as Jesus descended into the heart of the abyss, Uriel began to unveil them. He opened a scroll made not of parchment, but of pure, living light. As he did, the truth of the cross, the why behind the sacrifice, began to flood the underworld. It was a light that the darkness could not comprehend, and it poured into that waiting place, Abraham's bosom. The souls who had waited in hope for centuries, Abraham, Moses, David, Isaiah, they saw it. They saw the fulfillment of every prophecy they had ever spoken. They saw the Lamb. They saw the price that had been paid. The dim hope they had clung to for ages erupted into glorious, blinding certainty, and they rose. In the heart of the realm of the dead, there was an awakening. This was not just a descent. It was a jailbreak on a cosmic scale. Finally, as Jesus stood in the deepest part of death's domain, he stretched out his hand, and in the spirit realm, the keys appeared, not crafted by men, not forged in hellfire, but etched with the seal of eternity itself. The key of Hades, the key of death. Lucifer could not stop it. No demon dared speak. And as Jesus took those keys into his own hand, the authority that had held humanity captive for millennia was broken forever. He turned to Michael, and in the deafening silence of the conquered abyss, he said just 3 words, "It is done." Here's what most people never realize. The resurrection did not start in the tomb on Sunday morning. It started in Sheol on Friday afternoon. It began the moment death itself had to bow. It began when the chains of ages fell from countless bound souls. It began when angels lit fires of revelation in forgotten dimensions, when Michael stood guard over a divine repossession, and when Uriel unsealed a destiny promised since Eden. Jesus did not sneak out of death. He conquered it from the inside out, and when he rose from that tomb 3 days later, he was not alone. He was leading a triumphant procession, bringing with him every soul he had just liberated from that darkness. So now you know. When Jesus was nailed to that cross, he was not abandoned. He was not weak. He was not defeated. He was commanding angels in silence, issuing orders from a place of agony, and overthrowing hell with nothing but his blood and his obedience. Michael stood with his sword in hand, not to fight flesh and blood, but to guard the transfer of eternal power. Uriel burned with the mysteries of God, not just to observe, but to illuminate a truth that had been hidden since the beginning of time. And while men wept, and Rome laughed, and demons shrieked in confusion, heaven stood at attention. Because the moment Jesus said, "It is finished," Michael raised his blade in victory, Uriel sealed the scroll, and all of eternity shifted on its axis. It means you were never meant to fight your battles alone. It means even in your lowest moment, when your body is broken, your mind is dark, and your prayers feel unanswered, heaven is still moving. There are angels on assignment. There is a plan unfolding, and there is unimaginable power in your endurance, because sometimes your greatest victory comes not when you shout, but when you simply hold on, just like he did. Now I want to hear from you. Which moment shook you the most? Was it the silent, invisible command from the cross, the invasion of Sheol, or the moment Jesus took the keys of death itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't just watch this. Join the revelation. And if this opened your eyes to a deeper truth, share it, like it, and subscribe. Because the story of what happens next, you won't believe it either.